as you may be aware, I have been starting up a little collection of old stuff, and in doing so I've been following the Leicester toy shop online and in real life a little bit, and every time they come up with a piece of Starfleet merchandise I go, oh, I know those, and then it suddenly occurred to me, I've got those. So I wanted to put a little video together that just captures the various bits and pieces that I've got. It's not every Starfleet thing that's ever been released ever anywhere. It really isn't. It's far more limited than that, because I was using this stuff to help create content for my website sfxb.co.uk since the year dot, and people sent me stuff in and all sorts of stuff. So this is just a fraction of what's out there basically, but it kind of began with these sorts of VHS tapes, and these are compilation tapes. I'm getting it out purely because not everyone may be familiar with the concept of a VHS tape. So, you know, they are literally tape, and rewinding them took forever, and you could go and rent these from your local Blockbusters. If you see a Blockbuster video store in Captain Marvel, for example, this is what you got from the store. And just for chuckles, I will read you the back of this. General Kyle, correct, has 1 hour, probably, to hand over F-01 to the Imperial Alliance. If he misses the deadline, it's annihilation time for Starfleet. Trouble is, no one knows what F-01 is, not even the computers. And Makara, the reptilian commander, she's not a reptile, she's a cyborg, of the Imperial forces, is in no mood for excuses. Could this be the last countdown for Starfleet command? And ironically, it says 77 minutes of cartoon fun. It's not a cartoon. It's not even vaguely a cartoon. It's clearly puppets. So, like, I'm not quite sure why they went with cartoon as a description, but I think most of their other titles were cartoons. So, yeah, you can't expect too much. Now, from the same series, this wasn't the only issue of it. This is the issue that I've retained for whatever reason. We also then got the Thalian Space Wars. And it's got a Diex on the front cover there, which is it's just quite nice images, and you've got Shira on the back there. And again, it's 92 minutes of cartoon fun, apparently. Now, I can't actually remember, because I haven't researched this. I probably should have done before I started, really. Apologies. But I don't think that there were any repetitions between these two. They don't go in episode order. Thankfully, however, there was also this one. Now, this is really nice because this was issued by Thorn EMI Video. It's the only one they did, and it's very nicely presented. There's good cover imagery on the front there, but it's also 2 episodes together in full. It's episodes 4 and 5, as I recall. So actually, it's quite a nice unedited sweep of a couple of episodes, and literally these are the only pieces of sort of British released source material that I had available to me for the longest time, before someone was kind enough to send me the entire series, and before ultimately I got hold of NTSC US X rental tapes, which covered all 24 episodes across 8 tapes. Now, those I've passed on, and obviously with the DVD releases and everything else, they've become a sort of a bit of a moot point in terms of me needing them. So I passed those on to another website, and as you see, yeah, and that website is xbomber.co.uk, by the way, because it's well worth looking at that one as well. Now, the only other oddity I have held on to, and I for the life of me, I can't remember how I ended up with this. I guess it was probably an eBay buy. Now, this you will not have seen in the UK. This is actually, as it said, it's Starfleet episodes 7 and 8, but from memory, I think it was actually a Canadian release. So it's probably NTSC again. But as you can see, it's quite nicely done. They've got the sort of, the Starfleet logo there with a slightly different colour scheme than we're used to seeing. And they've also got some some nice images there as well off the back of it. Although I think the Escape from Black Hole images look like they might have been swapped with the Wrath of the Imperial Master ones, if indeed they are from the right episodes. I don't know. So it's quite a busy sort of case for it, but they've obviously put some oomph into it. And this is not dissimilar to the way that the American cases were for those rental videos I just mentioned, because this is just cardboard, so it's a kind of cardboard slip. We seem to have been unusual in the UK for having these very sort of hard plastic cases. It looks like most other regions may have gone for more environmentally friendly options. So there was that. Let's have a look at some of the written material now, because this was also a major source of reference material for me. And again, I don't know if it's a particularly sort of British issue or what, but I used to love getting these annuals every single year, and they would come out, you know, very, very regularly. Unfortunately, there was only ever one, and this actually arrived. I mean, it says 1984. I imagine it came out in sort of 83, because they tended to be dated the year after they actually sort of come out. But it was the only one we ever got. But the nice thing about it is, I mean, the inside cover is actually really, really lovely. Nice, really nice big sort of panoramic there. It's obviously original artwork, so that's nice. Because, you know, you could have just slung these things out really easily. But you've got, I've got to be quite careful with it because it's fairly delicate. But this one's held up remarkably well. So as you can see from the contents, there's a sort of general introduction to who's who, and there are some jokes, and there is also, you know, a lot of written stories in there. I'm just going to have a quick flick through to see if there's anything of particular interest from this. Because, as I say, you know, the actual sort of reference material was few and far between. So that's a description of Daix's weapons, which is quite useful because it was a Japanese series originally. There was a certain amount of English translation going on to sort of interpret what they actually meant into English, you know, in terms of from the Japanese description of the weapons and so on. So all of the individual Daix fighters had different names in Japanese as compared with what we actually got in the series. So we've got a little, there's an actual picture of the X-Bomber there. Now, for the longest time, that was one of the best reference images we probably had. And you'll notice that the paneling is actually quite brown, and I think I've seen in some 3D printing that I've seen people do lately that they have actually gone for the brown colour. I always thought it was a kind of dark grey in the series, but that may have just been the way that it was lit. But they actually used brown for the studio model, I think. So you know, that picture again is a very useful sort of first-hand reference, and that's a view of Makar's cruiser there as well, with some fighters very sort of close to the camera. So the scaling was very clever, because I think they must have sort of altered the closeness to the camera lens a lot of the time for the scale, because you really did get the impression that, and I think the models were really large. So in order to get the fighters and so on looking at the right sort of size, I suspect they probably had different sized fighters as well, because that's quite a handy trick if you can manage it. So if you have tiny ones and larger ones, then you can mess around with sort of false perspective and that sort of idea. So, and that's the back cover there as well, which is also nice. So it's I say, really sort of useful reference source for scanning and stuff back in the early days of the site's development. So I'll pop that one there. Now, again, I think this might have been a random eBay grab, but this is actually from France. So in France it was called Bomber X. It's pronounced like that, honestly. And I think there's been quite a few sort of DVD/Blu-ray products with the French dub of it on, and it's quite funny because their soundtrack is completely different to the soundtrack that we got. which is entertaining. Which reminds me, actually, there is a CD of the soundtrack available. I don't know if it's still available, but Paul Bliss was putting it out there. And you see, this is a kind of reproduction. I think it was a sort of reproduction of the early episodes, and you can see it's fairly basic. I mean, I don't know. This may be a French. Obviously, it's in a French style of drawing, I guess, but it's not perhaps what we would have expected to see. But it's telling the story very clearly. And as I understand it, the French are quite big into their anime shows. There's a lot of love for anime, so it makes sense that they would pay something like Starfleet some attention. Now, I'm just going to shuffle these back and make a little bit more space, which is appropriate. Pop that on there. Now, the other thing that Starfleet is known for is Brian May. But Brian May did not do the music for Starfleet. He covered it. And this is his cover. So that is Brian May and Friends' Starfleet Project, the single. And again, for those of you who are of a younger disposition, I mean, you might well come back around into vinyl, but that is a vinyl single. There you are. So played by using a needle to read the grooves on the surface of the vinyl disc to produce sound waves. Yes. So this is the sort of thing that I grew up with back in the day. This is copyright 1983 of EMI, produced by Brian May, son of Starfleet, Brian May and Friends. So that's quite a nice little thing to have. And that's the rear bit. So the first track Starfleet, the second one is Son of Starfleet, and that's all you get on the disc. That's it. And obviously Edward Van Halen. It was part and parcel of that little project as well. But the really nice one is this mama. This is the big one. Brian May and Friends, the mini LP actually. Let's call it by its correct name. And that is called the Starfleet Project. And it's just huge. But the other really nice thing about this was you get a nice little bit of spiel from Brian May on the back there. Quite frankly, I'm not sure if I've ever properly read that. I probably should do, really. And there's Blues Breaker on the back of that as well. It's Brian May and Friends, Edward Van Halen, yeah. Now, the interesting thing about this one is that, if I remember rightly, on the inside you've got a nice sort of image of the guys who were doing it and their guitars. But I thought, unless I'm completely making it up / going mad, there's no Starfleet Project logo on there as well. So it's really, really nicely done. Have I gone completely mad? Perhaps I have. I could have sworn there was more detail to it. I thought there was a ship image in with it as well, but there isn't. That's interesting. I don't know why I thought that. Unless there was a different edition of it that did, or perhaps I'm thinking of the Laserdisc actually. I might be thinking of the Laserdisc. It's perhaps getting a little bit crossed over in my aging memory banks. Now this, at first glance, has absolutely nothing whatsoever to do with Starfleet. It's not even mentioned on the front cover. However, I have a whole pile of these elsewhere, and despite the fact that it's not mentioned on the cover, it's a Thompson Twins kids, but there's only one of them. Okay. Despite the fact that it's not mentioned on the front cover, there was in fact a reasonably long-running Starfleet series. There's a little bit of Danger Mouse for you. That was the original Danger Mouse from the 80s in comic form, which is also nice to see. I just realised somebody wants hole punched this magazine. That's shocking, isn't it? I've never noticed that before. But the collection did come from slightly different places. But what we got was this rather lovely Mike Noble Starfleet strip, and it was often, they were sort of relatively short stories, but they were serialized over several look-ins. And I have got scans of these on my site, because again, this was one that I got with a view to putting it on the site. Many years after they'd originally come out, I seriously doubt anyone's ever going to release a collected version of it. It would have been nice if they did, because the artwork was terrific. There's a certain style of artwork that comes from this time in the late 70s, which I really like, because they take such attention to detail on the sort of the ships, and then the characters look exactly as they do on the series as well. So I mean, when you compare that to the French version, I far prefer the British version that we got. But as far as I'm aware, that is the only place that Starfleet appeared, and they did do some issues that were more focused on Starfleet when it was first coming out as well, that had sort of pull-out posters and stuff, because that was also a big thing in those days. And in fact, what were the odds of this? That I completely randomly picked this one out from my collection, completely at random, and there's a Terrorhawks segment in it as well. And of course, many people confuse Terrorhawks and Starfleet in their heads, but they are completely different. And this is a Jerry Anderson show, and many people think that Starfleet was, but it really wasn't. But Jerry Anderson was quite interested in it because he had Terrorhawks coming out, and so the comparisons between the two were inevitable, and yet they are completely different shows, because Starfleet was an ongoing storyline show back before that was a normal thing, really, for us. And so Terrorhawks was purely episodic. So very, very different shows, and different styles of puppetry as well, actually. In fact, I mean, Jerry Anderson actually abandoned his normal approach to puppetry for Terrorhawks. But the puppetry of Starfleet was different again. So, they're both unique in their own ways. Now, this is the final piece of the puzzle. Haha, pun intended, because this is what led me to engage with the Leicester Vintage Toy Shop in the first place, because in one of their Toy Shops on Tour videos, they found a Starfleet Jigsaw, and I think there was a debate at the time as to whether or not that was the only one. There are in fact 4, and I have all of them. Now, I'm saying there are 4 in a sort of confident fashion, because I think I remember that I have all of them. I could be wrong, and I stand to be corrected. But so these were released by Arrow Puzzles, it would seem. This is number 4 of the 4 that I'm aware of, I believe. I've never really sort of analysed it in detail, because again, it was the sort of one that I got for completion, and this one's actually sealed. So I assume it's complete, because it's never. Assuming this is the original seal, then that's it. And there's nothing on the back of it, detail-wise. But as you can see, you could easily recognise that from any of its sort of side views. And this, I think, was the image that was. This is Moonbase, on Earth's moon, and it's where X-Bomber launches from the moon. That's X-Bomber, by the way, if you weren't familiar. And we see it launch out from there, and it's basically where the crew of the X-Bomber initially meet. But the actual X-Bomber launch area is away from this area. So it was a really nice kind of matte painting that they used to create that. And that's a good sort of capture of it. So the other ones then were Diex, which is again, really nice for scanning purposes. My version is obviously, as you can see, is rather battered, but it's still a nice image. It's a nice clean photo of Diex and the Starfleet logo on the front as well. So again, similar things. So that is the first one. So that's number 1. So apologies for not doing these in order, but I'm just grabbing them as they were in the packing boxes. They haven't seen the light of day for a while, and again, that's a really nice crew image, and they haven't even put anything else on. All they've got is the Starfleet logo on. So again, that's been sort of reused and scanned down the years as a nice example of just because just size wise, it's it's a good A4 kind of size image, which you wouldn't have gotten anywhere else. And this one is sorry, that one was number 2. This one is number 3, and this obviously is exactly the same. So that's Captain Orion, the Imperial Master, and Commander Makara. So basically, that's the bad guy's crew. But again, that's really interesting because you can see that both Orion and Makara have quite elaborate swords there, and that's not really always obvious from the series itself. And the Imperial Master is actually that's really interesting because he's actually in scale with them, which he shouldn't be. He's actually a bloke in a suit. So I'm assuming that they put the models of Makara and Orion close to the camera and had him sort of stood in the background when they took the shot. So actually, it's a cleverly composed shot, because at first glance you would assume that he was done in exactly the same way as them, but he's not actually. That's just occurred to me. Never actually thought about that before, ever. So there you go. So that's it. There were definitely collectible toys that came out in places like obviously Japan, but France and Italy as well. So mainland Europe got more toys than we did. There was a little X-Bomber release. There's Diex toys. There has been a relatively recent release of a Diex toy. I can't remember who it was by now. It won't come to me. But there is one that's more recent, which was kind of... I think it was okay. I never actually got my hands on it because it was quite expensive. But I think others did do, and it seemed... I think it was very well detailed. It was accurate. And there were also some little... They weren't sort of... not bobbleheads, the sort of the pop toy ones, but they weren't... I don't know how well they did. I don't think I ever saw them in anger. The company contacted me at one point, I think, but they never sent me any. So, excuse me. So I think that's really about your lot in terms of what I've got collection-wise, because I also once had... I'm really racking my brains now. I once had a plastic kit that I got from somewhere of an Imperial fighter. I have no idea what happened to that. That I haven't seen in a long, long time. So I don't know if that got lost in a house move at some point or what, but it may have done, unfortunately. So yeah, so that's about it in terms of what survives for my collection. But it's quite nice to hang on to these. There is still a VHS recorders hanging around in the family somewhere, so if I ever wanted to see if those tapes played, I could. And as I say, they were used when I made some of my original clips, and I sort of encoded them and tried to clean them up a little bit. But I mean, those clips have been on YouTube for, well, I mean, hopefully they'll still be here when you see this, but they've been on YouTube for a long time now, so they're not exactly modern quality, it has to be said. But at the time, it was quite an achievement to do it, so I was quite pleased with myself for doing those. And then everyone else started taking off and doing the same thing when video capture became more common. But there you go. So I hope you've enjoyed that little run through. It's a useful reference point if you're wanting to collect anything Starfleet wise. You can use that as a reference point. I have no idea what they're selling for these days at all, so I'm afraid I wouldn't even care to hazard a guess for you. But yeah, so there you go. So that's me done for the day. Cheers for now.